an independent nuclear force. What political hypothesis, he asked, was satisfied by the idea of a national nuclear force? It was impossible any longer to imagine Russia launching an attack on individual European countries. There could no longer be anything other than a world war in which the United States would be involved on the first day, so that the fate of the world would be decided primarily in Washington. Individual national defense was no longer a possible military position. On the other hand, said the speaker, the French force could not provide France's allies in continental Europe with the guarantees offered by the United States deterrent. A British participant argued that the question was not whether France would have a nuclear force or not, but what that country would do with it. In the absence of increased consultation within NATO, certain anxieties might develop. Again, while the dissemination of nuclear weapons may have begun, that is not a reason for ceasing to oppose it, if only in order to enable a genuine agreement on disarmament to be reached eventually. In this connection, it was noteworthy that the USSR had refrained from supplying nuclear weapons to its satellites. A French participant observed that France wished its European allies to play the very role which France herself refused to play vis-à-vis the United States. He considered, however, that Britain, on its side, should become more European. Another French participant who did not wish to exclude the possibility of a revision of NATO in an atmosphere of confidence, emphasized that the main danger of French nuclear armament, apart from its effect on the country's economy and currency, lay in the breach of free world solidarity. Such solidarity must be maintained at all levels if we wanted to defend Western civilization. A German and an Italian participant spoke along similar lines and stressed the highly alarming nature of the present situation. The latter also expressed his concern at a certain anti-Americanism, a certain desire for neutralism, certain notions of a direct compromise with Russia which could be attributed to the President of the French Republic. France's partners, said this speaker, must not be forced to choose between Paris and Washington. During the discussion, speakers analyzed at length the factors in the present crisis, but at the same time they sought solutions which would make it possible to face up to the situation and bring about a smoother operation of the Atlantic Alliance. The problem of the alliance was set forth by a German participant as that of national security through collective defense, as opposed to collective security through national defense. Efforts to achieve integration should not only be continued but extended still further. In fact, NATO was only an improved military coalition. It was paradoxical that we should have an integrated operational command but, on the other hand, should not have such integration in the logistics sector. The same applied to the manufacture of weapons where research, testing and production were uselessly split up, this being equally harmful in regard to the quality and cost alike. The speaker wondered how the desire to possess national nuclear forces could be explained. Was it a question of prestige or of a wish to wield more influence or of suspicion of the United States, a suspicion which, in the speaker's view, was unjustified? After stressing Germany's determination to hold aloof from national nuclear weapons, the same speaker expressed the view that national sovereignty had become outmoded and that the concept of a European third force was unrealistic. In actual fact, he said, two concepts present themselves, an Atlantic community based on two elements, i.e., America on the one hand, and, on the other, Europe as the second pillar. This was a highly desirable formula but presupposed an integrated Europe with a central authority controlling nuclear weapons, a situation which required time to achieve. An integrated Atlantic society with common institutions. Here again, time was needed but an effort must be made forthwith to achieve a common policy instead of merely issuing communiques alluding to a common denominator. The French speaker, already referred to as the defender of the French government's policies, cited the superiority of American power and the solidity of the Atlantic Pact as factors essential to the equilibrium of the international situation, but he likewise cited the regional nature of the Atlantic Pact and the fact that it concentrated too strictly on the military aspect as examples of its present weaknesses. If confronted with global aggression, he argued, the NATO powers must be able to devise a global strategy and similarly reach agreement on questions outside the alliance's regional framework, e.g., the Congo, New Guinea or the Near East. Moreover, in order to obtain stronger support from public opinion, it would be desirable for the pact to concern itself with the economic and cultural fields as well. The same speaker was opposed to the American nuclear monopoly and the lack of balance in the alliance, and stressed that the French deterrent was not aimed at destroying the pact nor at creating a European third force. Neither neutralism nor anti-Americanism was involved, nor was there any desire on the part of France to see a Europe independent of the community. France could only benefit from coordinating its action with that of its allies, more especially as regards the distribution of strategic objectives and roles. On the other hand, France did not wish to see its strength submerged in a denationalized entity, and it was for this reason that France did not support the concept of a multilateral force as suggested at Nassau, a force which would be deprived of nuclear warheads, provision of which would depend on American goodwill. Replying to the previous speaker, an American participant set out his country's aims as follows: to encourage a strong Europe and hence to encourage its economic and political integration. To create and strengthen arrangements facilitating increased Atlantic cooperation. The nuclear defense of the West is indivisible. The defense of Europe is vital to the United States. The defense of Europe depends on the American deterrent. Because of this, the United States' commitment was of a permanent nature, as demonstrated by the presence of thousands of Americans based in Europe. Having expressed these convictions, the speaker went on to say that it was necessary to take joint action to maintain the stability of our economies, to strengthen our military potential, and to increase our assistance to new nations, more especially to keep them out of the grasp of the East. In discussing the difficult problem of the control of atomic weapons, a difficulty arose which had already been mentioned by a German participant. Technology had gone so much further than had the traditional arrangements between sovereign states that it was important to find new institutional methods for exercising our power over the terrible weapons available to us. There were three possibilities in regard to that power of control: leave things as they were, relying on the United States in the hope that the situation would not change. This implied an increased dependence of the free world on the United States and did not take account of the present British potential nor of the future French potential. Let things follow their course, more especially as regards the French force and its influence on the latent desire of certain other countries to possess their own nuclear force, with the consequent danger of proliferation already mentioned. To consider NATO as an atomic power in its own right and hence establish, at any rate among certain of its member countries, joint possession of certain nuclear devices with power of decision being held on an equal footing. The speaker considered this solution as the only one possible, given that Europe had not yet reached a stage where it could speak with a single voice, and such was the line of the present proposal for a multilateral force, which represented an effort, however imperfect, to utilize national potentials and enable all the countries concerned, even if they had no nuclear potential of their own, to participate in their own defense in this field. To make a choice in favor of a multilateral force was not, the speaker went on to say, an easy matter, since the objection to several fingers on the trigger still remained, and this applied to an Atlantic and a European force alike, so long as the latter failed to delegate power to one person, but that objection applied still more cogently to a juxtaposition of national forces with several fingers on several triggers, and a consequent increase in the dangers of an accident. Again, the creation of a multilateral force would enable the United States' partners to share America's experience in the management of such a force, and the speaker expressed the hope that in these circumstances the various countries would not insist any longer on the possession of a nuclear force. A British participant analyzed in similar terms the various possible formulas for emerging from the present situation, which he described as one dominated by psychopathological elements, a critical lack of confidence on both sides of the Atlantic, a profound anxiety resulting from the fact that the Soviet capacity to retaliate to an American atomic attack would lessen the credibility of the American deterrent. Three possibilities were open to us: each ally to possess its own nuclear force. Such a formula, said the speaker, was irrational and a cause of division within the alliance. A multinational force from which each member could withdraw if need be. This solution was likewise unacceptable since it involved discrimination in favor of those members of the alliance with a lead in the technical field which, the speaker reminded his audience, included the means of delivery. A multilateral force, but this would only be genuinely multilateral and retain all its credibility if it excluded any possibility of a United States veto on its use. This would not be easy in practice, if only because such a concession would involve the danger of increasing the United States' liabilities out of all proportion to its interest in the joint defense of Europe. The best practical solution would therefore consist in giving the European members greater say in the use of the deterrent by increasing their knowledge in this field and intensifying joint consultation. To achieve this, said the speaker, institutional arrangements were not enough and mutual confidence was a vital element. Interdependence must operate in both directions. A Turkish participant devoted most of his statement to this psychological aspect of cooperation between allies and expressed relative optimism. He suggested 3 approaches to prevent current problems from becoming harmful to NATO: elimination of any factors contributing to the dramatization of these problems, making allowance for the pride and susceptibilities of all parties, ensuring as far as possible that the various problems do not